Good evening. Welcome to the PoliticIt podcast. Tonight we have Representative Ryan Wilcox again, back for more. We're going to talk about the session tonight. So what were the memorable things for you? I know you were really busy. I bet you have the record for the bills this time.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that I'll ever do that again. That was rather intense. Most memorable parts of the session, probably, my most memorable thing is not a bill most years. It's probably bringing in the families of the soldiers we lost.
Oh, yeah.
That's last year.
That's always an amazing thing, but yet it's sad. There were too many of them.
Yeah. And, this year, I also we had a couple of first responders we lost last year. One, Sergeant Craig Ward, his little girls. And we had a firefighter too as well from Cache Valley. Sergeant Ward's little girls this time, and in fact they were all girls from both families. So we had 6 little girls that lost their dad, and I will never forget that one this year with those 2 little girls, and just learning about their dad, the look on their face when we all stood up in the house to honor him and to talk about him and how much we appreciated his service. That Sergeant Ward had trained several of the troopers that I was working with last year, and I was with them right after Craig passed, and anyway, and so I got to talk to those little girls about how much their dad's service had meant to all of the men that he served with. And anyway, it was quite touching.
Yeah.
Like it was easily the most memorable moment for me.
That was hard.
Yeah.
I always appreciate getting to be involved with that, but it's a hard deal.
Yeah, it is. But it's also super important, I think, for us to recognize those sacrifices that are paid not just by those who we've lost, but also by their families.
Yeah.
Right?
That brings it into focus when you see that everyone that's involved there had people they left behind.
Yeah.
And
it's a difficult, but I think it's an important part of the healing process for them. And I think for most of our constituents, as well as those other representatives in the government that recognize that all of this stuff that we're debating really is only possible because of those sacrifices that have been made.
Well, I think it really brings focus on that and shows us that, many people sacrifice a lot. And so we need to keep that in our memories.
Reminds us how important this stuff is.
Yeah.
I think. So that's probably my most memorable. There were a lot of issues this year. The largest tax cut in the history of the state, largest increase in funding for education at the same time.
It's funny how the focus in the papers on the on the education bill and the vouchers, right? Mm-hmm. You've got $40 million going to that, but I mean we increased the WPU by over 16%. When you think about that and the amount of money that's involved there, I mean, over 220 million. Just for teacher pay increases.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's hard for me when people say you guys don't care about public ed, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Since I've been there, I mean, we're over $2.5 billion additional funding for public ed.
Yeah, I know that is a hard conversation, and we don't get to decide how it's framed, right? And each agency, each group, each interest group that talks about this stuff has their own angle, and so some of that's to be expected. I'm not too surprised by a lot of what I've heard. I was certainly disappointed by some of the press releases and things about it. We are talking about less than 1% of the education budget, right? For example. We not only had the largest increase, but one of the things that's been hard for me is listening to like the Superintendent's Association sometimes and others who decry the raises going to teachers directly.
Right.
Right. Like I understand that they'd rather control it. They'd rather, decide how that's
the reality
spent.
of it is we had the largest teacher pay increase last year,
right?
But it didn't make it.
All of it didn't make it. All right. All of it didn't make it where we intended it to. And that's why that fund exists, frankly, so that we can, if we're going to give everybody a $4,000 raise, that it actually happens. And of course, the other, the $2,000 that was also part of that negotiation was intended to help with their benefits, which have been on an ever increasing track as well. So this should really actually have an effect on our ability to retain and recruit and make sure we have the best possible options for our kids. I'm hoping that that's the case.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, there's always going to be those who constantly look at the negatives. And certainly if I were, king for a day, maybe I don't draw it up like that. But that's not how real life works either.
Right.
Right. So when we're going into that negotiation, we knew it was going to pass.
Yeah.
It was going to pass this year, no matter what. Right. So that wasn't even the discussion. It was, do we negotiate? Do we improve it or not? Or do we just stay out and pretend like it,
Well, and this year,
matter.
one of the nice things about the lump sum is that it really raised the salary of the newer people a greater percentage, right?
Yeah.
Since it was the same amount to everyone. And I thought that was important because we're losing a lot of those teachers.
Well, we are. And, you've had a lot of these conversations over the years and, about teacher pay and average pay and all of that. Well, for the first time in my memory at all, we're going to be higher than the national average for teacher salaries in Utah.
Yeah. And
that's with 30% of the land that we control.
Yeah.
So you have all of these folks back east that we're competing with, and they get to tax 99% of their land.
And we
to
don't
pay for this stuff. We just don't. Right. So when you're talking about this level of an investment on our state, into not just the schools, but to the teachers themselves. Again, the highest, most that we can control is the actual instruction from the teacher.
Right.
Right. The quality of the teacher.
One of the things people don't understand is a lot of times the press likes to use this per pupil average. And one of the problems there, which I realized when I went in, is that we actually have some of the lowest cost of administration in the country, which actually distorts that per pupil average.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
And good for us, right? I mean, it's nice to hear that our administrative function operates at a much lower cost per student.
Yeah. Well, and there was so many other pieces, I know that was the one that everybody's talking about for the most part, but, additional learning opportunities for kids. One of the things we learned during the pandemic, and this is frankly the part that I pushed the hardest on in negotiations, is, look, it can't just be all or nothing. If we're going to offer these scholarships, you have to remember the kids that choose to stay, because the vast majority, and you're talking like 99+%, are going to choose to stay.
Right.
They're going to stay in public school. So what do you offer? What can we offer those kids when most of what they need is there, but there are these options they just don't have where they happen to go to school? Their future can't be determined just by where they live to that extent when we have that option. So adding that ability for to support kids that stay with additional resources they may need, or additional courses or training, was a super important part for a lot of us. We got that. We got all sorts of in fact, really just about everything we asked for in that last negotiation piece to improve it. It's far better than what we were presented with last year.
Right.
No question. It's better than it was when we opened the session because of those negotiations. The increased collaboration time and preparation time for teachers, that's tangible. They're going to notice that, just like they did this year.
Right.
I think you and I probably both got a lot of thank you emails from teachers thanking us for that prep time and how important that was for the development of their students. And so we went deeper into that collaboration and preparation time. Over half a dozen bills related to school safety. We have an entire package.
Were instrumental on that.
That was because of my role in overseeing law enforcement and criminal justice. After the Uvalde shooting down in Texas,
right,
this last year. You know, the legislature received about 7,000 phone calls and emails, and cumulative, right, about that issue. And frankly, it's something that's been on all of our minds, I think, every time we watch one of these disasters happen.
Yeah.
Is how
What did
prepared
you
are we?
explain a little bit about what we did in that bill? That was the bill with you and Ibsen, right?
Yeah. Well, 61 was the core piece, and again, that was the one I had responsibility for. And so, shortly after that tragedy, sort of convened all of the experts into one room, which was a large room down at the Department of Public Safety. And one of the things that we learned right out of the gate is that we're fortunate in Utah to have a lot of the national experts that are housed here. They just live here. Right. And so you're talking, one of those is former police chief in Ogden, Randy Watt. Right. Amazing guy. He was one of the witness for the plaintiffs, frankly, in Parkland. Right. Talking about what went right there, what went wrong there. We have a couple of other groups here in Utah that have been set up as national models to do national training for districts and agencies across the country. And so we have this expertise here that is pretty unique. And so getting all of those folks together to talk about, all right, where are we really? What do our threat assessments need to look like? And, I think my first conversation wasn't even with them. It was with my own superintendent, right? Like our own local school. Right. And sitting down and asking that question. And the answer has been, I generally
really appreciated going to meet him with you the one day that.
Yeah. But with that conversation really has come out with, it's a mixed answer. So in some of our new facilities, we're far more prepared just by design, right? And, in others that we have much older facilities that haven't contemplated the kind of threats that we're potentially dealing with. It's a very different conversation. And so that's all over the board in Utah. The parts that we identified that we could control are how we respond, how prepared are we ahead of time, and then how we respond, and what can we do in a worst case scenario. And
yeah, people don't realize how important that is, because when something like that occurs, the confusion that happens at the first really can make a difference. Being prepared, knowing exactly what the procedures are and what you need to do.
And everything's involved in that, from law enforcement response and training. How quickly can they get to a given facility? We've had a lot of conversations about school resource officers. The reality is, in a worst case scenario, I don't want it to be my mom who teaches at a junior high in Davis County. She needs to not be the first line of defense. Right. It needs to not be the janitor that happens to run into whatever this person is, right? My best option is that I have a trained law enforcement officer who understands, recognizes the threat, and can end it as soon as possible. And so we talk about school resource officers and how effective they are or aren't. There's a wide range of those too, but most of those that are left, honestly, after we sort of neutered them in the law a few years ago with the juvenile JRI stuff, most of those that are left are there because they care about it. Right? Because they're they're dedicated to helping those kids, to helping them make sure that they make it into adulthood, stay on the right path and succeed. And, those guys we spent quite a bit of time with, talking about what the problems they were having in school. And this is everything from bullying to, behavioral issues. One of the studies that we saw, we had an audit that we did at the state that showed us that we're far more likely to lose a teacher. We've talked about pay this morning already. Far more likely to lose a teacher over behavioral issues in a classroom right now than we are over pay.
Yeah, and that's a sad state.
Right. So there's a lot of pieces to this. It's how we deal with behavioral issues, like when it is appropriate to involve law enforcement, to involve the courts. When we're actively selling drugs in school, probably, for sure. That shouldn't be swept under the rug. Right. When we're actively, committing assaults. There's some things right there that we've.
I think you came in at a really good time for the state, for law enforcement. Right after the George Floyd thing, and
oh my goodness.
And the bills that got passed that were really anti-law enforcement, and really getting to the stage where we're really looking at those things seriously, and bringing back the respect to the officers.
Yeah. There's it's an important part of that conversation because it's cultural, right? One of the things we found too is that how effective those programs are really depend on the leadership in a school. So, and I'm talking your principal, your administrators, do they incorporate the SRO officer into their team, or do they view them as like an enemy of some kind? Yeah. They can't, frankly, do that work if they're not viewed as part of the team and if they don't function that way. So, a lot of, and by the way, the final version of 61 did not require SRO officers. It encouraged them by including SRO services as part of the grant program. But what we're talking about, the final version of that bill, is significant investment in school safety. You're talking $75 million, right, just in the grant portion. And then on top of that, so about $85 million total by the time you incorporate software and training. So we identified...
That's a significant amount.
Oh, John. We haven't never... The training piece alone is super important. And Representative Johnson, who from Cache Valley, is a former principal, right? He's been involved in education for a long time. Ran one of the more important pieces in my mind, and that is how we talk to kids about it, right? It's called standard response protocol. On my end, I incorporated that into 61 because I need to make sure that law enforcement is speaking the same language no matter where they are in the state. So schools understand what lockdown means. Everybody has the same, common language that we're using. And if I happen to have a highway patrolman that's driving by and there's an incident at a given school, he can immediately integrate into that solution and know without a doubt, because of his training, he can incorporate with Ogden, with Logan, with whoever it is that happens to be the closest responder to address that immediately. That piece.
It's nice to think about those things in advance.
Well, and that piece is super important for the kids because, again, for the kids, we don't want this just to be security theater, right? It's got to be actual security. And for them, they need to understand in a developmentally appropriate way, which is Representative Johnson's point, right? They need to be able to understand what that means. We're not going to be calling active shooters or any of those things that bring unnecessary stress and all of that to kids. We want to be as invisible as possible for these kids, right? So that all their focus, all I want them worried about is reading and learning their calculus and all of the things that they already have stress. And I don't want teachers worrying about it either. They're going to,
right? But
they'll worry less with the appropriate training and communication and making sure that we have what we have in place. We've incorporated some software solutions that are pretty cool, right? That giving them options for some software that can identify weapons as soon as they're brought onto the property and that notify law enforcement immediately, like within 3 seconds, right? As soon as something's brought on site, that notifies the police are on their way and notified before somebody, even approaches a school. So there's some cool stuff right there. But again, this is the beginning. The whole point is to bring up our minimum standards so there isn't a dramatic disparity between where a kid lives on how safe he is going to school.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, people don't realize how much thought went into that and how many meetings.
This is thousands, it's thousands of hours, right? By people a lot smarter than me, right? And there, like I said, there's 6 different pieces. The bowling piece, I'm super excited about. You and I had a meeting with parents from our area last spring, and the bill that we passed, Representative Peterson actually passed it. So there's the bills that we pass ourselves, and then there's the ones that our team does, right? That it's really us too, but. Anyway,
that's what people don't realize is there really is a lot of collaboration across a lot of people on these major pieces of legislation.
Yeah. And Karen's piece on the bullying issue, one of the problems that we had is that we were transferring kids away, from a bully and then transferring the bully to the same school. And in some cases, the same classroom. Right. And there's all sorts of issues with that. But it's really just because nobody's trying to be malicious about it. It's just because we just didn't have a way to track it and to recognize that was the issue. But what Karen's does that I'm most excited about is incorporates it into what's called the parent portal. So every parent can log in, see what those issues are, notify the appropriate person, and then we have an ombudsman there that is responsible for helping to communicate and make sure that all that stuff happens the way it's supposed to. Right. And so we can, just like we can eliminate a lot of the safety concerns by design, by appropriate design, going forward with how we build schools, how we, design.
Well, and we've got some of those schools, right?
Yeah.
So it's neat that we've got this long range plan as schools are being replaced to make sure that we incorporate the things that we've learned.
Well, and some, Jordan School District, for example, has been used as a national model for how well they've done with school safety and preparation. Ogden Weber's team is probably the most well-trained from a law enforcement perspective, right? And that goes back to, time with Randy and the previous sheriff and the work that they did, and Sheriff Arbon have continued to make sure that their guys, no matter where they are and what schools they're assigned to, they're coordinated with the local agencies. So it doesn't matter if it's North Ogden or Pleasant View, it's in Harrisville, a small agency, they're incorporated into the plan together. And so we've been able to take some of those best practices, and we're going to not just identify and lift them up, but then make the best practices the standard practice.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Hey, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've got Ryan Wilcox here, Representative Ryan Wilcox, and we're talking about the session we just went through. So, the one thing I'd like to go into is the taxes.
Yeah.
Maybe we could start there.
Yeah. I mean, the largest tax cut in the history of the state. That's nothing to sneeze at. It dropped from 4.85% down to 4.65% across the board. So if you pay taxes in Utah, pay income tax, you get a tax cut.
Yeah.
Right. So there are some other targeted tax cuts, but this one is just flat across the board the way it should be. I sort of love a flat tax concept anyway. So
yeah,
that's how I prefer to do that. But we had a lot of emails, I think, this year about Social Security tax cut, and then we got that done. Yeah,
that's one thing that hasn't really been publicized that much.
No.
But that was great to move that number up to $75,000, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big deal.
No taxes on Social Security if you make less than $75,000.
That's correct.
Total.
Yeah.
Which means you could have a lot above what you get on Social Security and still not pay taxes on your Social Security. So.
Yep. Yeah, which I understand, right? The fixed income issue, you paid taxes on all through your life as you were earning that money. We shouldn't be taxing it anyway.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a win for us. A double dependent exemption got passed for when you have children. One of the things that we were talking about off camera here, we're transitioning from the education conversation is, our birth rate is declining rapidly in Utah. It has nationally. It has, basically all of the Western world.
Right.
But especially in the United States, and Utah has followed that trend. So we're sub replacement level at this point. We're less than 2 children, right, per. So we're talking financially. What does that do to not just our education fund, but our ability to continue to thrive as a society? One of the greatest advantages we've had is Utah being the youngest state in the nation, primarily because we have a lot of kids.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like our number one export has been our kids, and we've got to figure out a way to adjust to these demographic changes, and at the same time encourage those who are there to be able to take care of those kids. And so that includes an additional tax credit for kids 1 to 3 years old who need help with childcare.
Right.
Right. The earned income tax credit went from 15% to 20% of the federal rate. Right. So there are a lot of little pieces up to and including you're in my favorite, the food tax.
Right.
Right. That we talked about for a long time.
Now that's dependent on
that comes with a caveat. Yeah.
Right. And let's talk about that a little bit. You've got some of the details from that. So
yeah, well, some of those questions, why does it come with a caveat? Why couldn't that just have happened on its own? And I don't know if you want to answer that question, but why not? Why didn't we just do the food tax?
Well, I mean, there's several things going on there, right? Yeah. One, replacing all that revenue,
right,
with a different source. And one thing people don't realize is with the reason why we've done a lot of income tax decreases is that income tax is a tax on productivity.
Yeah.
Right? It's the wrong kind of tax.
Right.
And we want to become less dependent on that.
Yeah.
Right? But as we do that, when we're taking the tax off food, we still need to have this adjustment going forward, right?
So yeah, and I talk about my fantasy version of all this. I prefer a flat tax, and that would be like a flat tax across the board in Ryan's fantasy, right? Consumption, et cetera, all the way. But
well, and that's one of the problems with the tax on food is that that part of sales tax is regressive.
Yeah.
So the people with less income pay a larger percentage of their income. So if we can take it off of basic necessities like food, then it's not as regressive, right?
Yeah. Well, and the argument against taking the sales tax off of food, and one of the arguments has been that portion of the fund goes to the general fund. That portion of the tax goes to the general fund.
Right.
Which is how we fund everything in government outside of
education.
Right. So the growth in the tax fund has all been in the income tax, which is all earmarked for it. The increases the pressure, and frankly, you can talk about, Medicare. The state voted in referendum for Medicaid expansion a few years ago. So again, mandatory entitlement spending.
Yeah, the legislature tried to avoid that as long as we
legislature tried to avoid. Neither of us were there at the time, but we tried to avoid that for logical reasons, right? Being able to fund it, for example. But all of that pressure is on one side of the ledger. And so what the agreement has been that if we are going to cut things on that side of the ledger where we don't have any room to cut, then we've got to adjust the earmark, and that is, from the income tax for public ed.
Right.
And so what does that look like? What will it look like? What are the assurances that we can give? And that's where the negotiations went on throughout the session with the education community. What works so that we can make sure and provide the actual funding that you need, absent the earmark in the state constitution. Because again, that's really what they care about, is what's a stable funding stream.
Right.
To take care of the needs of the children of the state, which is, again, not part of the federal constitution. I'm not sure that the federal Department of Ed should exist. Yeah. Based on my understanding there, but it is part of the state constitution. It is directly our responsibility to provide that education for the children of the state. And so I've got the language right here in front of me. Yeah, I don't want to misquote it or anything.
So why don't you?
But a lot of this is the same concept that we voted on with Amendment G a few years ago, right? When you and I were first elected a few years ago. So what I'm going to read this right here, and this is the language itself. So of the proposed amendment. So all revenue from taxes on intangible property or from a tax on income shall be used, A, to support the systems of public education and higher education as defined in Article 10, Section 2. That's normal. It's going to also say, and B, to maintain a statutory public education funding framework that uses a portion of revenue growth for expenditures from the Uniform School Fund for changes in student enrollment and long-term inflation. So we're going to cover enrollment plus inflation, so growth plus inflation, and provides a budgetary stabilization account. So including stabilization fund, right? So we're talking about that long-term security.
Well, and what's good about this is that if you look at business cycles and the way stuff fluctuates, right now we don't have a really convenient way of saving while the economy's hot for when it turns down.
Right.
And that's what the stabilization fund is all about.
Yes. Yeah. C, to support children and to support individuals with disabilities, which we all voted for a number of years ago.
In amendment.
Right.
Right.
And to support other state needs after the fulfillment of the requirements in subsection 5. And that's the key. And so by including these guarantees that we're going to cover your growth, we're going to cover in addition to that, your inflationary costs, which haven't ever been guaranteed, right? And rather than a debate about growth and inflationary costs, it's just part of the state constitution now.
Right.
Right. And to provide for the budgetary stabilization account. Those are big deal stuff that are going to be in there, which are actually the things we care about.
Right.
Whether or not everything in a certain fund or economic changes that have happened. We've had these debates a little bit about, internet sales tax. Right. And the prior governor, Governor Herbert, struck a deal with Amazon, and they started paying, they acknowledged that they had nexus in the state right before they built a giant facility in Utah.
Right.
Right. Like that was well done, Amazon's government affairs people.
Right.
Congratulations. But the bottom line is those are going to continue to change, right? How we spend money, how we collect taxes. Those, as the economy changes, those are going to have to be, we're going to have to be able to adjust. This allows us for the flexibility to cover the needs of the state, the entitlement funding that we've all voted for. Some of us voted for.
Yeah.
The entitlement spending that
Right.
the state has voted for. And frankly, things like we were talking about in the previous segment with public safety, with our kids and how that needs to be taken care of long term. There are so many parts of this that are beyond this one piece that are going to be affected.
One piece we didn't talk about with this too, though, is property tax.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people
Yeah.
don't realize
Yeah.
that we actually cut the state's portion of property tax
That's right.
in half almost.
Right.
I mean, a pretty significant amount. But one of the things you need to realize is most of the property tax is actually city, county, right? School
Local
district,
political subdivision.
right?
Yeah. Yep. That's right. Yep. And yeah, you're right. Like we've gone through enough tax cuts here that we missed talking about property tax in the year of property tax.
Which is probably, which honestly is probably the thing that's on people's minds the most right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Very often. Yeah.
Right.
Or at least it was last November when we were all paying our property tax bills.
Right.
To Weber County. Yeah.
So, what other things stick out to you?
So
I mean, those are the big ones.
Those are
huge
big ones. Those are big ones. We did a lot with mental health. I want to give a shout out here to former Representative Anderson. Right here, there are a couple fun ones to talk about since we're here in Weber County. Former Representative Anderson is out there living his life, being a great guy. He's making money off of appraisals. Right, he does appraisals. And making money off the state as the state decides to transfer property from one entity to another. And he calls me up one day, it's like a year and a half ago now, and tells me, I appreciate the business, but I don't know that the state should be paying these hundreds of thousands of dollars to transfer money to land to itself.
Yeah.
Right? From one agency.
Because there was a law that said if you transfer the land, we have to figure out what it was worth, right?
Yeah, and I understand that. And so it took a little while we tried to get it done last year. We ran out of time, but we actually got it done this year. And so Representative Musselman and I took the reins of that in the House, and that's House Bill. Let's see, what's our 457? We got that done in the last few days, and so it was fun to be able to report back to him. Thank you, Representative Anderson. I even included him in my speech on the floor. Right?
That's good.
I just love that. Those are my favorite bills. Is when you have conversations with constituents, they come up with an idea and they can see something that you can't see, right? But that needs to be addressed. We had a number like that. The landscaping bills that basically you tell cities and counties and HOAs that they can't stop you from putting in water-wise landscaping if that's your choice.
Yeah.
Right? If you recognize that we've been in a drought cycle and you don't necessarily want to contribute to that, and you don't want to do that anymore, you want to recognize, do what you can to help, that they can't stop you. And previously they were.
Yeah.
Right. And it was fun like that.
That doesn't mean people can just have a dry lawn in the front of their house.
No, there still can be standards,
Right.
right? But you can't stop somebody from putting in drought tolerant plants. You can't require them to have Kentucky bluegrass everywhere.
Right.
Right. If they choose to do that on their own.
And
So
that's smart for long-term growth in Utah.
it's personal liberty. It's also, a question, but it's also, what in the world is government doing? Like getting in the way of that anyway.
Right.
So it's bad for us as a whole. And so that was fun to get through. You had a fun one.
Well, what, and I was going to say something about that. So you ran that bill in the House, and that's another constituent type thing. So I like to go to car shows. And there were a number of people that could not drive the cars that they fixed up because they would build these resto mod cars, which means that you take an older car and you make it new, right? Yeah. You put a new engine, you put new transmission, you put new suspension systems and brakes. But I think those people should be rewarded for going the extra mile and putting the right computer in there and the catalytic converters and make it so it doesn't have emissions. It complies with the new emission standards rather than the old ones.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of fun to...
It was a lot of fun. There's, when somebody puts a lot of money into a project like that, it's typically not alone, right? Everybody I know that does that with their kid. Like they do that with a family member. I got a lot of emails about that, especially after the presentation on the House floor. from fathers and
so
sons,
what were
right?
people saying?
Well, just that story of, oh, I put together this old truck with my grandpa. It was such a cool thing for us, but we couldn't drive it more than like the 500 miles, whatever it was, right? And how much they appreciated that we even thought of that. And it's not something I would have ever come up with on my own, right? And if you hadn't brought it up to me,
it's just because of interacting with other people, which is what we do, right?
Yeah, but allowing them to make improvements to those vehicles, we should be able to also do the emissions. Right, and allow them to drive them more than artificial limits. Yeah. So it's both the freedom thing and the, getting government out of the way.
Yeah, you guys had a lot funner conversation than we
did in the Senate. There's a couple others I want to mention. A lot of cool stuff on domestic violence. We'll talk about that later. The really important changes there. Egg retailer. We can talk about that one real quick.
Yeah.
That's another constituent that owns a restaurant. He invested a lot in this, in a French restaurant actually, and gives me a call saying about how he had to lay off his pastry chef. Which, can you imagine a French restaurant without a pastry chef?
Yeah, doesn't make sense, does it?
Because over the egg thing of all things, right? He wasn't able to get the supply, and he tried to buy from local suppliers. And you're at some point you get desperate enough. You're going to the backyard people that have chickens, right?
Right.
It's like, can I pay you for your chickens, for your eggs? And what he found out is he wasn't able to. And it wasn't because what we thought it was. We thought it was a problem in the code. We thought it was a problem with the State Department of Agriculture or something that was in the way. This restaurant is in Utah County. But what turns out it wasn't the Department of Ag, and it wasn't the farmers or anything. They were all on board. We thought we fixed it years ago. It was the local health department. So the local health department was preventing him. They were using federal rules to supersede Utah law, right? And so that took a small change, but it's sort of a big deal. Like for restaurants that are trying to stay in business and make it through this weird time. Frankly, all the studies that I've seen show that the closer the product is grown, or in this case, eggs laid to your home or to your business, the healthier it is anyway. Right. So you're providing a healthier product, you're providing a safer product, and you support a local business all at the same time and support local farmers. I don't know the downside, but we finally got it figured out, worked it out with the health department with the language that we put into the egg retailer bill. And it's a small thing, and it doesn't matter to a lot of people, but it really matters to the people it matters to, and it does increase both freedom and opportunity in Utah. So,
well, I like rules like that in a way are actually taking away rules.
Yeah, right? That's it.
They're just allowing people more freedom and more ability to do what they need to do to keep in business.
Yeah, and I look at this list here of all these things, and each one of these has a story like that behind it. From property transfer to the landscaping, to eggs,
so
to
the
firearms.
egg thing is no different than the emissions thing.
Not really.
Really, right?
Right. It's the same principles of liberty that we, hopefully are reinforcing as we go about our work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So, been nice talking with you.
Always. Thank you.
It's really cool to kind of recap things, especially from the standpoint. I mean. That law enforcement part of it was really important to me to talk about because of the amount of involvement you had with that and your passion.
Oh, thank you.
It's really nice. Yeah. So we'll see you next week.
Okay.